Hello. Welcome back to my YouTube channel, Keeping It Real. Um, and today I wanted to talk a little bit about change. And obviously, most of us know change is inevitable. And sometimes, we might perceive it as being something that's positive. And oftentimes we're not so happy about change and we think of it as negative. And in the moment, I think that makes perfect sense, right? Because it's how change is affecting me in that moment at that time. But it's an interesting thing because I think change in many ways pushes us to explore new ideas, new patterns, and that might be the scary part, right? We've talked a little bit about, or I have, about self-narratives and sort of labeling things in our lives with ourselves, others, people in our lives, relationships. And when we do that, in part, it's so that we can feel comfortable with ourselves and others. And so any kind of change can kind of rattle us a little bit. And then we start questioning, right? We start sort of scrambling to re-identify and rename things, rename parts of ourselves and others. And I always say clients of mine sort of inspire me or affect me in many ways with what I might want to talk about with others. And I do hope these small, short sessions help somebody, hopefully more than somebody. But one of my clients mentioned about where she used to work. She used to tell the story about the guy, I believe it was an old story about a man who, he lost his horse, and the people in the town said, "Oh, that's just awful. I'm so sorry. That's terrible." And they said, and he goes, "Well, maybe." And then later, the horse shows up and had brought more horses, and they were like, "Oh, that's wonderful. That's great." And he said, "Maybe." And I might not be telling the story entirely correct, right? But then his son was trying to work with a horse or get on a horse, and the son, he falls off and breaks his leg, and people in his neighbors in the town, they come in, "Oh, I'm so sorry, that's terrible, your son's leg was broken, that's awful." And he said, "Maybe." And then later a war breaks out, and they're coming around, and they're gathering the young men in the town and all over to go to war. Only his son couldn't go because he had a broken leg. And again, is that a good thing? Maybe. And my thoughts on this are that, it is our perception of reality that matters, obviously. Certainly perception is reality, some would say. But I think we can affect that too. We can have an effect and really retrain our brains. So much of our narratives come from our emotional side, which is out of fear. Sometimes we can say, "Oh, this is bad," because maybe it is scary feeling. There's a fine line between fear and excitement. And so change can be maybe fearful, but it also can be exciting. And it can push us to learn about ourselves, learn about others, and really, there's a lot of positive sides to change. But we have to make it what we want it to be to get what we need out of it or what we want out of it. And that can be really hard, especially if we feel like we are not in charge, we're not in control. It can feel more like a victimization, like this is happening to me. I didn't want this. I didn't choose this. I don't know what to do. I don't have control over any of this. And that can seem very scary. I try to tell clients when we get into situations where we feel we don't have any control, which, one might argue that we really are never truly, completely in control of anything. But I try to tell clients or encourage them find something that you can have control over. And it may seem silly and insignificant, but it could be anything. I can control brushing my teeth twice a day. I can control, perhaps walking my dog in the morning. I can control, when I drink a cup of coffee. It really, the significance isn't over the actual event itself. It's more about creating patterns, habits. We've talked about that. Having these healthy habits be consistent, and in order to feel like we have control, maintaining consistency is key. And so when we feel out of control, something in life's happened that we didn't plan on, or we felt was out of our control entirely, I suggest leaning more into the things that we do have control over, small as they may seem, especially during the times when we feel like we're in a struggle with ourselves, and finding ways to get our footing. And really, another thing I tell clients, and I had to tell myself too, is to go easy on ourselves. I mean, give yourself some grace there, where you feel like you're saying, hey, this is hard for anybody. Change is difficult. I might stumble a little bit around and not know what I'm doing, and that's okay. That's human. It's perfectly normal. I might have to ask for help. That's also something that I encourage, and I think is normal and healthy. We are not put on this earth alone. And we might have to, give ourselves time, space to breathe and to accept change, and that's growth. There's no real growth usually, as you usually hear, without some sort of struggle. And let's face it, most of us like to be comfortable. We are creatures of comfort, and so we don't run racing, trying to find change. Now, a lot of folks have said to me, and they might argue and say, well, I love change. And it could be true. I sometimes wonder if we don't love the idea of change. It seems exciting and thrilling, but when we go to implement it, it's not quite as easy as most of us anticipate, even if it's good change, right? People have babies, and that can be exciting, but it can be stressful. It's still change. Weddings, marriages, death, all of these are big life changes. It could just, could be a new job, a new residence, getting a new pet, making new friends. Some of them are good things that we put in the category of good change, and some are not so good or bad change, if you want to call it that. But these are perceptions. This is how we cope, because we like to categorize things, and that's okay. But I like to challenge people, including myself, to really think about these things when they happen, much like the story that my client said. I think it's a good one because, it's not settling on good or bad, black and white thinking. It's not knowing, is this a good thing? Is it a bad thing? Could be both, maybe neither. It's change. And it's about adaptation to change, which really is the biggest predictor of how people can be successful, and not just in life, like, working or relationships, but emotionally and mental health. If there was a goal in life, I would say, well, nothing's perfect, so it can't be perfect. Can't be happy all the time. So being happy, you hear that a lot, and that can be frustrating actually, because for people who don't feel happy all the time, or a lot of the time, that can make you feel like a failure. I would suggest being somewhere in the middle, saying to oneself, I'm happy sometimes I'm not, but I'm finding ways to manage all of it. I'm finding ways to treat myself decently and to give myself room to breathe, love myself enough that when these things happen, I'm not sticking to the narrative of, oh, I should be able to handle this. Don't should on yourself, right? But it's okay to say, wow, I'm on the struggle bus here. This is not easy. I'm really struggling. Whether you say it to others or yourself, but just maybe try some radical acceptance and know that you're not alone. No one really is great with change. And that's just my 2 cents. Maybe people would argue that, but I love change too. Well, once it's happened and everything's settled down. But I don't know, maybe you guys would feel differently. But I hope this helps, and I will see you back next week. And I don't know about anybody who watches this, but here where we're at, it is 5 billion degrees outside and 200% humidity. So try to stay cool, and I'll see you back next week.